This is Guyana, a country known as the land of many waters. Celebrated for its lush green, many rivers and lakes, flora, fauna, waterfalls, birds, forests, and a jungle filled with many unique species. It is also a country that was known once as the breadbasket of the Caribbean, a country that could have comfortably fed all its neighbors. These are certainly all positive characteristics that any other nation would envy. But those characteristics have over the years been shadowed as our nation's character has been tarnished as a result of many negative reports that have hit regional and international airwaves, rampant crime being at the top of the list. This, of course, includes our country's link to international narco trafficking. The recent revelation that Guyana has been named notably among other ports used by an international alliance between the New York Mafia and a powerful crime syndicate in Italy to smuggle drugs may not come as a surprise to many, since persons have often joked that the only form in which cocaine has never been trafficked from the shores of Guyana is via the national anthem. Citizens are constantly bombarded with reports of cocaine leaving in fish, pepper, pineapples, achar, cabbage, pampers, and so many other products. Indeed, the narco trade has tarnished our nation's character. In 2005, Guyana's then main opposition party, the People's National Congress Reform (PNCR), said that there was sufficient anecdotal evidence to suggest the drug trade had already infiltrated the ruling People's Progressive Party civic government, sections of the country's law enforcement agencies, and certain other state agencies. The PNCR had then pointed to the fact that while there were many major arrests and successful prosecutions outside of Guyana involving huge quantities of illegal drugs, all of which passed through Guyana, there were no corresponding arrests and prosecutions in Guyana. The party had also challenged the PPPC government to urgently table their anti-drug master plan in the National Assembly. In 2008, then PNCR leader and opposition leader Robert Corbyn said that the recent revelations coming out of the Sahid Rojakan drug case was a reflection of the Guyana government over the past 5 years. Corbyn had accused the government of providing a healthy environment for drug lords to operate in Guyana. In 2011, the PNCR again threw out a call for the government to get serious about taking on the drug trade and narco traffickers. That call came during the investigations into the 200-pound cocaine container that was busted in Jamaica after the ship arrived there from Guyana. Then presidential candidate Brigadier David Granger said that the government was not serious about effectively tackling the narco trafficking problem. Granger had made specific reference to the absence of the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit from the seaports, although hundreds of containers are shipped out from the same seaports every month. And as we fast forward to 2014, it was less than 1 week ago the People's National Congress Reform urged the People's Progressive Party to stop engaging in slander when it comes to drug lords and deal with the narco trafficking problem facing Guyana. The main political opposition, a Partnership for National Unity, has spoken out on the fact that our borders are porous time and time again. Leader of the People's National Congress Reform and opposition leader Brigadier David Granger, APNU Shadow Minister of Public Security Winston Felix, and APNU Shadow Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure Joseph Harmon recently met with Army Chief of Staff Brigadier Mark Phillips for discussions relating to reports of Guyana's ports being used in advancement of the drug trade. Here are a few comments made after that meeting.
As for this meeting with Brigadier Mark Phillips, the Chief of Staff, in light of the extremely grave reports that we received about the linkage between Guyanese narco traffickers with the Italian mafia, we felt that this is a situation that requires immediate and forceful reaction by the part of the Guyana government And we met this morning with the Chief of Staff and the senior officers to call attention to the gravity of the situation and to give support to the Defense Force in filling a void that has opened in the national the national anti-narcotic strategy. We are aware of the fact that there is now no valid national drug strategy master plan. It has expired, and the administration seems to be in no hurry to implement a new plan. Everyone knew that when it expired in 2009, it would have had to be replaced, and there is no justification for waiting 5 years for its replacement. We feel that it is because of the absence of a national drug strategy master plan that cocaine trafficking continues to take place in Guyana.
Secondly, the actions that we have taken in the Select Committee on Money Laundering, we have actually made some recommendations, and principal among those recommendations is the ability to give our law enforcement agencies the ability to deal with money laundering inside of Guyana. And this is the problem that the government has. This is the problem the friends of the narco traffickers have. The fact that they do not want the law enforcement agencies to be able to touch the proceeds of crime, to be able to touch the narco trafficking money that is all around us here in this country.
It is obvious that a plan is needed to clean up Guyana's reputation for being a major port for illegal drugs. This is The Public Interest. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us, and of course, welcome. This week, a partnership for national unity is focusing on the fact that we can't seem to get the problem of narco trafficking in our country under control. With me, as always, is leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Okay. Great to have you this week. This week we're talking about narco trafficking, and the conversation comes at an appropriate time because there was the recent discovery of a self-propelled semi-submersible marine vessel in the Burima-Waini region. Of course, that has to do with trafficking in narcotics. But even before we talk about the narco trade in Guyana specifically, you're calling on President Ramatar to do something other than talk to bring the situation under control. But the people may argue that, what else can the president do? What else can he do to stop the narco trafficking in Guyana?
Well, the president is the president, and he is in control of the executive. And what the country needs now is executive action. We've had the People's Progressive Party civic administration for 22 years in this country, and every year the problem seems to get worse. And what happened earlier this month, August, is that for the first time in our history, we've seen some sort of semi-submersible vessel constructed on Guyana territory for the purpose of trafficking cocaine. It means that we've taken cocaine trafficking to an industrial scale, industrial level. Who can do anything about it? This is not a problem for the opposition, it's a problem for the government, and the president is head of the government. Several things have gone wrong, or several things have never been implemented, and the president has to be aware of it. If he is concerned enough to speak about narco trafficking, he must be concerned to do something about it. The problem in narco trafficking in Guyana is not that people haven't been talking about it, but the government has been doing nothing about it. So that is why the president is the one to take a step forward and bring this scourge to an end.
Even before I go on to other specifics, some may also argue, well, what does David Granger and a Partnership for National Unity really want the president to do now? There's already this no confidence motion hanging in the air. What really can he do if general elections are inevitable in the near future? What else can be done?
Well, narco trafficking has nothing to do directly with general elections, except insofar as we can say that it is one of the numerous failures of the People's Progressive Party civic administration. But there's a lot the president could do, because on a day-to-day basis, he's still head of the country, still running the government. And what we've seen on the part of the PPP Civic is a failure to implement recommendations which have been made at various levels. For example, I can start with looking at the United States Department of State, because every year they publish something called the International Narcotics Control Strategy Report. And every year they criticize Guyana as being a platform from which narcotics, particularly cocaine, would be exported to other countries in Europe, North America, and apparently we're diversifying our export markets, if you can call it that. But even if you paid attention to the United States State Department's International Narcotics Control Strategy Report, I think we'd start to make some headway. And significantly, 10 years ago, the U.S. Department of State started to refer to the problem in Guyana as being a lack or arising from a lack of political will. So they were able to discern a long time ago that it is not purely a matter of resources. The government had no will to bring this scourge to an end. So I would say the first thing to do is that the president must pay attention to the numerous recommendations which have been made over the years, coming from external agencies such as the United States Department of State, and implement them. I would say that in addition to that, there are other local measures which could be implemented, and I don't think the president is moving along those local measures either.
Okay, I'm happy that you talked about local measures, because persons from your party in the past would have said, your party and your partnership, that the environment for that our environment in Guyana is one that for drug lords and drug traffickers to thrive. Is that still the case?
Well, we had hoped that the present administration, the PPP Civic administration, would have implemented something called the National Drug Strategy Master Plan. There was one under Mr. Gadraj when he was Minister of Home Affairs. It was never implemented. The next Minister of Home Affairs, Ms. Gail Teixeira, was responsible for promulgating the second plan, which Clement Rohi inherited. But that plan expired 5 years ago. So right now, it is true to say that the country has no National Drug Strategy Master Plan. And I would say that as a start, we need to have such a plan. And once we have that plan, I think we can start looking at how that plan could be operationalized or implemented. But the next step is for a national plan to be produced.
Are you confident that this recent find, the vessel recently found, could sort of propel government to address or re-examine or come up with a master plan?
Well, that is the problem we face, that the government is aware of the seriousness of narco trafficking over the years, and we have not had any decisive action. It is true that they did set up the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit, CANU, and it is true that there's a Police Anti-Narcotics Unit, but those two units are starved of resources. And why I put emphasis on the National Drug Strategy Master Plan is that it calls for the creation of an architecture in which at the pinnacle is the president himself. So it is not misplaced faith in calling on the president to act. He is head of the counter-narcotic strategy in Guyana, personally. So he cannot avoid that responsibility. But then you have a lot of committees, bringing the army and the police together to get the information and intelligence and so on. Below that you have regional structures so that the regional authorities could report information. And of course below that you have the forces themselves, so that you have intelligence agencies, enforcement agencies. So there is, I would say, a stratified structure calling for the enforcement of anti-narcotics legislation. So that is why it is important to have a plan. Right now there is no plan, and there are no people in the organization. There's no organization which can bring the scourge of drug trafficking to an end.
If I can just come off the specific plan for a while to bring the scourge to an end. I read somewhere, and if I can just quickly quote, an article talked about the U.S. and Colombia being able to choke off the Pacific route to Central America and U.S. Now, this is where Guyana comes in, and I think our borders come in. How equipped, even if they were to come up with a plan as soon as possible, how equipped is the Guyana Police Force, and I think by extension to the Guyana Defense Force, to protect our borders?
Well, you see, recently the cabinet approved the increase in numbers of the Guyana Police Force. That is necessary but not sufficient. We need to do much more. You asked the question, I don't think they're adequately equipped. I don't think that the Coast Guard is adequately equipped. I don't think that the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit is adequately equipped. I don't think the police, their maritime wing, and the Police Anti-Narcotics Unit is adequately equipped. So I think that there is a gross deficiency. In fact, there's a gross inability of these agencies to actually implement and enforce the law. So if we are to make headway, we need to ensure that at least one or all of the security agencies have surveillance aircraft. As I keep saying on these programs, the border in Brazil is over 1,100 kilometers. You can't expect people to walk. You can't expect to provide vehicles to patrol that distance. We have to use other forms of surveillance. And I would recommend that we use aircraft for it, in the short term. In addition to that, you need all-terrain vehicles, because sometimes you may hear that planes land at a certain point, but before the police could reach that point, the planes have taken off and nobody's in sight. And of course, going there the next day, asking people to give you a lift on some vehicle, miners or something, is a complete waste of time, because narcotics could be delivered in this country from foreign sources within minutes. Literally 3 or 5 minutes. And the people who are receiving it know what to expect, and the people who are delivering know what to expect. So it's not a long process of negotiation and selling and buying. So I would feel that if the enforcement agencies were given aircraft, if they were given maritime vessels, if they were given all-terrain vehicles, we could make great headway, but those resources are very scarce at present, even for normal law enforcement, much less for counter-narcotics operations.
Reports have indicated that the vessel recently found, may have been built here. Two things. People are saying that that might have been a distraction from a much larger quantity going out. So my first thing is, are you concerned that it could have been a distraction? And if it was built here, again, it comes back to, what does that really say for us? It's dangerous.
Well, it would be an expensive distraction. I don't believe it is a distraction. I think that the vessel is purpose-built. It was designed and constructed to transport narcotics. And I accept on face value that that is its purpose. What I would say, however, is that it might not be the only one. Some people feel it's the only one. It might have been, there might have been a vessel in some other country which came here to operate before, which determined the feasibility of embarking on such an expensive construction. So my view is that it was a good lesson for us. I don't congratulate anybody, but I feel that we have made a new discovery, and we should plan to ensure that narcotics and narcotics vessels, whether they're aircraft or boats or road vehicles, are not prepared or used to transport narcotics out of this country. Guyana has become a platform, a warehouse for exporting narcotics. We don't produce these narcotics, particularly cocaine, but we seem to have been developing the commercial expertise to export these goods all around the world in all sorts of commodities, from achar right down to timber, lumber.
Are you concerned that people may say David Granger doesn't necessarily speak when the law enforcement officers discover people with it in a suitcase, in pastry, in achar, in vegetables, you name it, in fruits. Are you concerned that people would say that you don't congratulate the law enforcement officers enough when they actually find these people going out on planes, aircraft, different aircraft?
No, they're doing their job. If I was to comment on every incident of narco trafficking, I'd be talking all day. Because not a day passes in which there is not some substantial or significant breach of our laws, particularly with regard to narcotics trafficking. And I'd really be talking all the time. I am concerned that people should do their job. I can't go around the country, patting people on the back simply for going to work and preventing illegality. I'd be congratulating every department of the government. So I give credit where credit is due. But what I'm saying and what I'm calling for is for the PPP administration to ensure that these law enforcement agencies have sufficient resources.
Before we have to begin to put a wrap on it, this year in 2014, we also heard about the mafia connection with Guyana and the drug trafficking. Has that made our situation worse?
Well, it certainly signals a deterioration of the security situation because the Italian mafia has been notorious for the last 100 years. And once we, as this Guyanese saying goes, once we tie bundle with the mafia, we're begging for trouble. And these are not Sunday school, this is not a Sunday school picnic. This is not a tea party. There will be more execution, there'll be more gun running, there'll be more enforcement of the drug traffickers' will. So I was quite alarmed last February to hear about it. And I hope I hope against hope that it's just a one-off incident, but it doesn't seem so. It signals a ratcheting up of the security threat because it means that there are foreigners who are likely to come into this country on any pretext and maybe either propagate their business or maybe eliminate persons who try to obstruct their business. I'm terribly worried about the mafia connection. Terribly worried.
In the final minute or so, is David Granger willing to sit down with Donald Ramotar and a team to specifically deal with the issue of drug trafficking in our country?
I don't consider myself an expert in narco trafficking. I know people have studied this and written papers and designed programs. I'm not an expert, but yes, in answer to your question, I would say I am prepared to sit down and work with the government. We need to have a national approach, but I would like to make the point that the PPP has been aware of this problem for 22 years and has done nothing. So it would be futile for APNU to jump into this situation, try to help an organization which doesn't want to help itself. So I don't want to be made a fool of. I don't want to participate in some ornamental process. The minister does that quite well. He set up, his own anti-narcotics task force and all that. But I want to make sure that narco trafficking is brought to an end. And if it means speaking with the PPP, I'll do that.
Thank you very much, sir. Leader of the People's National Congress Reform and Leader of the Opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. This has been another edition of The Public Interest, and we were discussing the situation of narco trafficking in Guyana. I am Malika Ramsey. Join me again next time. Goodbye.